Fredrik Backman's And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer is a small, luminous novella that reads like a quiet, aching letter from a son to his father, and from a world that remembers to a world that forgets. For American readers who prize stories about family, memory, and the dignity of ordinary lives, Backman's book lands like a soft but insistent knock on the door, intimate, unavoidable, and full of the kind of tenderness that lingers long after the last page. The novella is not a sprawling epic. It is a concentrated, crystalline meditation on aging, loss, and the strange, stubborn ways love persists when language and time begin to fail us. The story opens in the ordinary domestic space of a kitchen and a living room, the kind of rooms that exist in small towns from Maine to Minnesota, where the hum of a refrigerator and the smell of coffee are as much a part of the furniture as the chairs. Backman introduces us to the narrator's father, a man who once navigated the world with the steady confidence of someone who knew his place in it. He was a man of habits, of small rituals, of a life built on the scaffolding of memory. But now those scaffolds are loosening. The father's mind is slipping, not in a dramatic cinematic collapse, but in the slow, bewildering way that mornings longer and the path back home feel unfamiliar. Backman's prose treats this slippage with reverence. He never sensationalizes the illness, he simply watches it, like a neighbor watching snow melt. What makes the novella feel distinctly American is its attention to the everyday, the way grief and care play out in the small domestic economies that define so many U.S. households. There are scenes that will feel familiar to anyone who has sat with an aging parent. The awkward silences, the repeated questions, the sudden flashes of recognition that arrive like sunlight through blinds. Backman writes these moments with a tenderness that American readers will recognize from their own kitchens and living rooms. He understands how the rituals of family, making coffee, folding laundry, watching old television shows, become the scaffolding that holds memory together, and how the erosion of those rituals can feel like a slow unmooring. The novella's emotional engine is the relationship between the narrator and his father. The narrator is not a distant observer. He is a son who remembers the man his father used to be, stern, stubborn, sometimes infuriating, and who now must learn to love the man he has become. Backman avoids melodrama by focusing on the small, precise details that reveal character: the father's stubborn refusal to throw away a particular mug, the way he hums a tune from decades ago, the way he misplaces words and then finds them again in the most unexpected places. These details accumulate into a portrait that is both specific and universal. American readers who often carry complicated relationships with their own fathers, mixtures of admiration, irritation, and longing, will find themselves reflected in these pages. Backman's narrative voice is spare and lyrical, a combination that makes the novella feel like a memory itself, fragmented, luminous, and sometimes unreliable. He uses repetition not as a rhetorical device, but as a structural truth. Repetition is how memory works, and repetition is how caregivers survive. The book's title is itself a kind of refrain, a line that returns like a tide. Each morning the way home gets longer, and yet the son keeps walking it. That persistence is the heart of the book. The son's daily acts of care, driving his father to appointments, sitting with him through long afternoons, answering the same questions, are rendered as acts of devotion rather than duty. Backman shows how love in the face of decline is not always heroic. Often it is simply the willingness to be present again and again. There is also a quiet humor threaded through the novella, the kind that comes from long familiarity. Backman allows the father to be himself, grumpy, opinionated, occasionally mischievous, and the son to respond with a mixture of exasperation and affection. These moments of levity are crucial because they humanize the father and prevent the story from becoming a mere elegy. They remind readers that even as memory fades, personality remains. The father's stubbornness, his small acts of defiance against the indignities of aging, become a source of dignity. American readers who have watched a parent resist the indignities of illness will recognize the bittersweet comedy of these scenes. Backman also explores the social dimensions of care. The novella does not isolate the family in a vacuum. It shows how neighbors, friends, and the routines of community life intersect with the private work of caregiving. There are small acts of kindness, a neighbor bringing over soup, a nurse who remembers a favorite story, that create a network of support. This communal texture will resonate with American readers who live in towns and neighborhoods where informal networks often substitute for formal care systems. Backman's portrayal is neither sentimental nor cynical. He simply acknowledges that care is a social act as much as a private one.